welcome through a multiple choice question walkthrough. This is for revising year 12 macroeconomics. It's great for AQA and Excel, OCR, you name it. If you just want to practice your general theory and make sure that you've got all the little details right. Plus, they're really fun, great thing to do in your revision. Which of the following would be an example of a loosening of fiscal policy? So in other words, this is called expansionary fiscal policy. That's usually the more common way you may have heard of that. So expansionary fiscal policy means increased government spending and decreased taxation. And money supply, this is actually monetary policy, so that's not the right one. Inflation is not a policy. A fall in interest rates, monetary policy. So actually we got lucky, that's the answer, D. D is right because a rise in the budget deficit means G is greater than T. If that's increased, we've had either more G or less T. So that is Y is right. The AD and the short run AS, which of the following could explain the shift in the AD curve from AD1 to AD2? So we're looking at a shift right, and that's either because of more consumption, more investment, more G, more X, or less M. So let's take a look at what could be. We got lucky, look at A. An increase in exports will increase AD. Economic growth is usually measured by the annual change in. We're looking for real GDP. And it's usually percentage change in real GDP. But real GDP is usually, it's equivalent to real national income. So that is actually a valid answer too. Which of the following is the most likely to result in a demand-side shock to the UK economy? Demand-side shock, I'm assuming, is quite negative. So we're looking at an AD movement to the left. And an AD equation is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So for that to shift left, we're looking for less C, less I, less G, less X, or possibly more M. And let's take a look one by one. So a rise in world commodity prices. I think this really affects firms' average cost of production more, and I'm guessing that's going to shift the short run AS more. So I think that's a supply side shock. If wages increase, again, supply side shock. Average cost of production increase. I think that's not the answer. A rise in UK interest rates. Okay, if interest rates increase, it becomes more expensive to take out a loan. So we can expect people to consume less, but also people want to save more, and that's another reason why they would consume less. So with less consumption, less AD, and now we have the answer. Growth and national income relationship and the increase in investment. This is the definition of the accelerator. It's not in all your specs, but it's certainly cool. So yeah, accelerator happens because there's been growth in the economy, there's been more output, and because you have produced more output, companies have had to keep up with the amount of capital they have to produce the output. So they've had more capital stock, and that means that they must have invested somewhere along the way. So that's really cool. It's a good one to use. Question 6, what is most likely to lead to a deterioration? Okay, so some context here. The UK has a current account deficit, which means imports are more than exports, or exports are less than imports. And for that to deteriorate, we want that to get worse and worse, larger and larger deficit. So we want X to keep falling or M to increase. Okay, if UK inflation is high, UK prices are high, that means we're going to sell fewer goods because to the rest of the world, our goods are getting more expensive. So they're less likely to buy. So more inflation is going to harm our exports, which is what we want. So I'm looking for an increase in inflation. The exchange rate, to sell fewer exports, we are looking for an appreciation, because an appreciation increases the price of your exports. So that is an increase in the exchange rate. We want people to be spending money, so we want them employed, so we want unemployment to decrease. That's the answer. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England meets every month to decide on the rate of interest that is most likely to help it achieve the government's inflation target, which is 2%, by the way. The MPC is most likely to decrease interest rates if you want to increase consumption, and if you want to increase AD, and to increase AD, that should many times lead to higher prices. So we're looking for a situation where prices are quite low, or output is quite low. So inflation is above target, just the opposite of what I've said. The B sums, I'm skipping that for now. Employment is rising. If employment is rising, the economy is probably doing well. The economy is probably growing. It's probably close to full capacity already. So that doesn't seem to be the answer. You need to expand the economy if you want to decrease interest rates, and it seems to be doing fine. So I think C is unlikely. That's the answer I'm looking for, negative output gap. So it's, in other words, a recession. If there's a recession, the output in the economy is very, very low, prices will be very low, and growth is very low. One of the functions of the Monetary Policy Committee is to achieve its inflation target, but also support the government's objectives of growth and stuff. So that seems really likely. Which of the following is most likely to lead to a decrease in aggregate demand? That means a shift to the left. So less C, less I, less G, less X, more M. An increase in imports. Yeah, watch out for the increase in something bad. That's the answer. The annual rate of inflation in the UK falls from 5 to 2%. So we have disinflation. But the annual rate of inflation in other countries is higher. So we've got prices elsewhere increasing faster than prices in the UK. So the UK, even though it has inflation, is probably going to be in a good position because everything else is getting more expensive much faster than the UK. So the UK is going to seem to be relatively cheaper in terms of its exports. So UK exports should increase. We have an increase in the long run AS, which is because of more factors of production, or because they are higher quality, such as education, such as training, such as more new technologies. So we're looking for something that increase factors or quality. So A doesn't seem very relevant, I'm going to ignore it. Improvements in the banking system that increase the funds available for investment. That sounds good. That sounds like something that will increase the investment, so increase the capital. And with more capital, you have more factors of production. Maybe it also creates innovation and increases the quality. So I like the sound of that one. Cyclical unemployment. That's unemployment caused because of recessions. So we look for something like a recession. So B seems unlikely because recessions don't tend to last 15 years. Especially the word as a coal miner suggests that's the choice of industry that's been difficult. Jill seems to have been unfortunate in terms of losing their job, but they're starting next month. It's quite easy to find that job again. I wonder if a recession usually lasts that long. Okay, this is the best guess. This one has the word recession in it very clearly. We have a PPF. The economy is at point X. Assuming there is no change in the PPF, a movement from X to Y illustrates there has been, so there's no shift of the PPF. I think it doesn't seem that way. So we're just producing more output without increasing the long run AS. So no long run AS. The only way you can increase output is by more AD, more short run AS. So we're looking for something that, rise in real national income. The other ones are wrong. So if there's an increase in underlying economic growth, you're looking to boost your trend rate of growth. So you're looking to do something like this. That's a long run AS shift, and that's something that would shift your PPF. So that is not right. An increase in spare capacity is definitely not the case now. There is no spare capacity at Y. You're fully utilizing all your resources. An improvement in technology would shift the PPF again. So through elimination, we're left at C, but also C is right because, as I said in the beginning, there's been more income because there's more capital goods and more consumer goods produced. The Chancellor of the Exchequer announced plans to increase government spending on construction projects, such as schools and so on, in order to help the UK economy from entering a recession. They want to prevent a recession, and the way they've done that is spent lots of money on these construction policies. So this is a tricky one because it's the government spending. So that they're increasing government spending. The government can do two things. They can do fiscal policy or they can do supply side policy. For me, the spending on construction projects is more supply side. However, there's some ambiguity because they are doing this in a recession. Although it can be pretty safe because they're definitely not contracting the economy. So these are just wrong. It's definitely not monetary policy. That's the Bank of England. So A seems to be the answer for that one. Demand pull inflation is most likely to result from an increase in... So we need an increase in aggregate demand to cause demand pull inflation. You can see that P1 to P2. And that could be caused by an increase in C or I or G or X or less M. And let's take a look. Increase in interest rates? No. Increase in government spending? Yeah, that's the answer. In the long run, a fall in the exchange rate. Fall in the exchange rate. Did you know it decreases export prices, increases import prices? So X should increase and M should decrease. So increase unemployment because it makes domestic products less competitive. No, untrue. It makes them more competitive. They're cheaper. So that is the wrong way around. Increase in unemployment because it makes foreign products more competitive. Imports. No, imports are way more expensive. That's wrong. Reduce aggregate demand because it increases the domestic currency price of imports. Imports are going to increase in price. That's fair enough. But that if we import less, then this is a funny trick. If the imports are going to decrease, that is actually going to help aggregate demand. So C seems to not be the case for that that trick. Increase aggregate demand because it can reduce the foreign currency price of imports. Right, I think this means exports is getting cheaper, which it is, and we know that increases X, and if we have higher X, that increases AD. So that's the answer. That's I haven't seen that one for a while, that kind of question. Shows the most likely impact of a rise in wage rates. So this is going to increase average cost of production, so that shifts that short run AS to the left. So I'm looking for something like this. That's possible. That's possible. We go to the next one, together with a fall in interest rates. If there's fall in interest rates, it becomes cheaper to borrow, so there'll be more borrowing. More borrowing, more AD. So I'm looking for more AD. And it looks like B is going to be the answer. A large increase in interest rates in the UK is most likely to. Okay, we have interest rates increasing. It's going to increase the savings, which decreases C. It's also going to discourage consumption. It's more expensive. That's going to decrease AD. Same with this one. So we're going to decrease AD, and we don't have that one yet. Decrease the size of the government budget deficit. So if there's less AD, the economy is going to crash, it's going to decrease output. There'll be more unemployment. I'm guessing the government is going to have to spend more as a result, so I reckon that's really unlikely. An increase in investment? No, if interest rates are more expensive, firms that want to take out loans to buy capital will find it more expensive. So they will not want to do that, they'll invest less. Lead to an increase in bank lending. This is a really sneaky question, I think. So on one hand, people are saving more money. So more money is coming into banks. But because interest rates are high, people can afford that less. So there'll be less demand for loans. So I don't think there'll be more lending. I think there'll be more saving in banks. Decrease in house prices, okay, because it's more difficult, more expensive to acquire a mortgage, less demand for houses, so falling house prices. You've also got the economy not doing very well, and maybe higher unemployment. It's a tricky one. In country X, the underlying trend rate of growth is 2.75. The table below shows the actual rate of growth in real national income over 4 successive years. Okay. The underlying trend rate of growth, I know that that's like the average, the long-term average rate of growth. And we can see over these 4 years, we've always been below the long-term average. So in terms of like the boom and the bust cycle, we're kind of always below somewhere. So I'm looking for something related to that. I don't really know what I'm looking for, but fingers crossed. Unemployment increased. Okay, so I know that we are below the potential. So in other words, we're probably in a recession or something like this. So that seems like a possible answer. Aggregate demand fell between year 1 and year 2. Difficult to... No, it hasn't, because there's always been growth. Yeah. There's always been growth. Oh, this one's good. Okay, there's always been growth, which means because there's always been growth, there's been more output and more employment required. However, unemployment will increase because you're still farther away from your PPF. So we're doing something like we're kind of getting closer to the PPF, but at the same time the PPF is kind of getting further away. So A still works, but aggregate demand falls is not true because we've always had more growth. Productive capacity decreased. No, nothing to indicate that. And okay, that's too unlikely, so I'm just going to go for A. Countries experiencing a balance of payments surplus, so we're looking for X to be greater than M. But growing inflationary pressures. Okay, that makes sense, because if you export more and you import less, you have X minus M increasing, which means AD increases, and you should create demand pull inflation. Prices go up from P1 to P2. So we want to reduce this. Okay, so we want to reduce the surplus, we want to reduce X, we want to increase M. So I'm just going to focus on that. A cut in interest rates is going to increase consumption, and that's going to increase M. That seems to be a possible answer, at least for the first one. So I'm just going to put a dot there. If the exchange rate appreciates, if the pound appreciates, this makes exports more expensive and imports cheaper. So we should import more. Seems to be a possible answer. A rise in the budget deficit means there's more government spending or less tax, or a combination. And I'm wondering how that links to imports. I mean, maybe you could say people have more higher incomes because they've had more benefits coming in than taxes. So maybe you could say that they will import more. Okay, this maybe seems to work, but I don't think it's as, I'm going to say it's less likely. And a decrease in government spending, this was, I don't know, I think it was possibly too out there, too unlikely. So let's kind of pick between A and B. So I'm going to use the inflation rate. We want to reduce inflation. So a cut in interest rates does the opposite. If you cut interest rates, you will increase AD. So that should make inflation worse. And if you appreciate the exchange rate, that should just increase M and pull down AD. So that's the answer. That's another tricky question. Which of the following is most likely to be classified as an instrument of monetary policy? So you are looking for interest rates, you're looking for quantitative easing, possibly the exchange rate. We don't do that very often, but we could. Taxation, this is fiscal policy. Inflation rate is just not an instrument. Exchange rate, this is monetary policy. This is fiscal policy, so we're left with C as the answer. Here we have AD shifting right, so we should have more C, more I, more G, more X, and less M. And why could that be? An introduction of supply side policies? That's not really, I mean it could be due to that, because if the supply side policies are really expensive, then there'll be higher government spending and maybe higher AD. I'm just going to say it's probably unlikely, but I'll just put a dot. Increase in the government's budget surplus, they are spending less and taxing more, that should harm AD. Expansionary monetary policy, okay, so if you decrease interest rates, consumption is going up, AD is going up. That looks good, and that looks better than my the idea for A. That was a bit of a stretch, the A one. Which of the following is an example of fiscal policy having a direct supply side effect? Right, so fiscal policy means that they're spending money or taxing, and that has for some reason impacted the long run AS. To impact the long run AS, you're looking for factors of production, and you're looking for a higher quality. So I'm looking for something like this. I don't really know exactly what to expect, but let's take a look. An increase in the money supply, that is just not fiscal policy. So I'm just going to cross that out. That's monetary policy. A reduction in income tax, fiscal policy. And the supply of consumer credit. Okay, they're talking about consumption, credit, loans. That sounds to me like it's going to increase AD because it increases consumption. So I think that this one's pretty unlikely. A reduction in interest rates, boosting investment. You reduce interest rates, more investment. Okay, and the investment improve the productive potential, right? Because you've got more capital and more technologies and stuff. This is the answer. But aside from one thing, I nearly got cut out. Interest rates is a monetary policy. That's not a fiscal policy. Government expenditure on retraining schemes increasing okay, that's the last one. Retraining schemes is going to help people get the higher level of skill. So if there's more skills, there's a higher quality of labor. So that will increase the long run AS. Declining consumer confidence is shifting that to the left. As a result, output falls and unemployment rises. Type of unemployment that results from this fall. Okay, so it's talking about consumer confidence. I reckon there's been a shock to consumer confidence, so I'm thinking something like possibly a recession that kind of affected people's confidence. And with a recession, the type of unemployment is cyclical, so I think that's the answer. Which of the following is most likely to reduce the level of investment in a particular economy? So investment is done by firms. They are investing because they think they will sell lots of goods and services with the higher output that they can produce with the machinery. So a fall in aggregate demand, this looks to be the answer. If aggregate demand falls, firms won't like this because the level of output in the economy is going to fall from Y1 to Y2. So they're going to require to produce less goods. And because they're producing fewer goods, they don't need to invest in those new machinery and capital goods. So that seems to be the answer. Foreign companies build new factories in a country to take advantage of cheap labor and cheap land. As a result, the country's economy would be okay. The important thing is we're building factories. If you build factories, you are increasing your stock of capital. And as a result, we're looking for a PPF shift to the right or a long run AS shift. So I'm looking for any kind of long run AS shift that although it says A says a movement along, I'm not liking how it says a movement along. I was imagining a shift. I'm going to cross that out to remind myself. And a shift of its long run supply curve. Okay, that sounds good. Movement along long run, that does not sound good. These questions. A shift in AD. Yeah, a shift in long run. That sounds good. Okay, so we're between B or D. And let's think this investment in factories has probably generated a lot of spending in that local area. So I think that would also shift the aggregate demand. You've got more investment coming in, so there's more AD. So the AD has also shifted to the right. So we end up with this graph, which is D. Okay, so I hope you found that really enjoyable and you're motivated to have a go at another year 12 macro revision multiple choice question. They're really great. Let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions or any other requests that you'd like me to make videos on. Thank you so much. Bye.